He thought it was a joke. A police officer laughed in the middle of the mall when a young black girl said her mom was in special forces. But seconds later, his smile disappeared because walking straight toward him was a woman in full Delta Force gear, and she wasn't here to play. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Are you serious? The police officer's laugh echoed through the crowded shopping mall, bouncing off the tiled floors and polished glass storefronts. Shoppers turned their heads at the sound. Their curiosity briefly peaked before they continued with their bags and conversations. To most, it was just a momentary distraction. But to Nia, it felt like the whole world was watching and no one cared. Standing before the officer, Nia's curly hair was tied tightly in a bun, but strands had escaped, framing her tense face. She kept her gaze fixed on the ground, staring at her scuffed sneakers as if they could swallow her up. Her small fists clenched at her sides, trembling, not out of fear of the officer, but from frustration. She had gathered all her courage to approach him, to tell him what she had noticed, that someone had been following her for the past 15 minutes, moving when she moved, watching her every step. And yet, here she was being laughed at. "Kid, you've been watching too many movies," the officer said, still smirking as he folded his arms across his chest. His Navy uniform was pressed and spotless, his badge gleaming under the bright mall lights. To him, this was a harmless teenager with an overactive imagination. "This is a safe mall. Go shop for some shoes." He thought it was a joke. A police officer laughed in the middle of the mall when a young black girl said her mom was in special forces. But seconds later, his smile disappeared because walking straight toward him was a woman in full Delta Force gear, and she wasn't here to play. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Are you serious? The police officer's laugh echoed through the crowded shopping mall, bouncing off the tiled floors and polished glass storefronts. Shoppers turned their heads at the sound. Their curiosity briefly peaked before they continued with their bags and conversations. To most, it was just a momentary distraction. But to Nia, it felt like the whole world was watching and no one cared. Standing before the officer, Nia's curly hair was tied tightly in a bun, but strands had escaped, framing her tense face. She kept her gaze fixed on the ground, staring at her scuffed sneakers as if they could swallow her up. Her small fists clenched at her sides, trembling, not out of fear of the officer, but from frustration. She had gathered all her courage to approach him, to tell him what she had noticed, that someone had been following her for the past 15 minutes, moving when she moved, watching her every step. And yet, here she was being laughed at. "Kid, you've been watching too many movies," the officer said, still smirking as he folded his arms across his chest. His Navy uniform was pressed and spotless, his badge gleaming under the bright mall lights. To him, this was a harmless teenager with an overactive imagination. "This is a safe mall. Go shop for some shoes." His dismissive tone stung worse than the laughter. Nia felt her chest tighten as humiliation washed over her. People passed by, glancing but not stopping, their faces filled with disinterest. A few even whispered to each other, shaking their heads as if she were nothing more than a dramatic kid seeking attention. But Nia wasn't imagining things. She had felt it, the heavy gaze from behind her, the way footsteps echoed too closely no matter how fast she walked, the shadow that always seemed to linger near the corner of her vision. It wasn't in her head. Someone was following her. Someone dangerous. Her lips trembled, but she forced her voice steady. "I'm not making this up. He's real. He's been behind me since the food court." The officer sighed dramatically, rolling his eyes. "Look, I've got real problems to deal with. Not made-up spy stories from teenagers." That broke something inside Nia. Her throat ached with unshed tears, but her spirit, sharp and stubborn like her mother's, refused to back down. She swallowed hard, pulling her phone from her pocket with shaky hands. The officer's smug expression didn't falter. He assumed she was about to call a friend, maybe even her dad, who'd come storming in and make a scene. But Nia's fingers moved quickly, dialing a number she knew by heart. Her mother's number. Because if there was one person who would believe her, one person who always believed her, it was her mom. As the phone rang, Nia glanced over her shoulder. Her heart thumped wildly. There he was again, the tall man in the dark jacket, pretending to browse through a store window, but not actually looking at anything. His eyes flicked back to her just for a second, and that was enough to send a chill racing down her spine. She turned back quickly, clutching the phone tighter. "Mom," she whispered when the call connected, her voice trembling despite her attempt to stay calm. "It's happening again. Someone's following me. I told the officer, but he doesn't believe me." On the other end, silence for a beat. Then a voice, firm, controlled, but laced with an edge of steel. "Stay where you are. Don't move. I'm on my way." That was it. No panique. No hesitation. Just certainty. Nia closed her eyes, relief flooding her chest. Her mother wasn't the type of woman who asked 1,000 questions. She trusted her daughter's instincts. And Nia knew she could trust her mom to handle whatever danger was lurking in the mall. The officer raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "What? You calm, Mommy. Is she going to come hold your hand?" he said mockingly. Nia didn't answer. She just held the phone tighter, whispering into it as her mother gave her instructions. Her mom's voice was calm, steady, and it gave Nia strength. "Don't look back anymore," her mom said. "Just stay in the open where there are people. I'll find you." For the first time since stepping up to the officer, Nia lifted her chin. The tears were still threatening, but now her jaw was set, her shoulders squared. Her mom was coming, and when she did, Nia knew this officer's laughter would be the last sound he'd ever make at her expense. Because her mother wasn't just anyone. She wasn't just a parent. She was a woman with training, discipline, and a reputation that few could match. A woman who had faced dangers far greater than a mall stalker. A woman from the Special Forces. And she was only minutes away. Nia had noticed him earlier, a tall man in a black hoodie, pacing near the food court. At first, she thought nothing of it. Malls were busy, people walked around, and sometimes you just happened to see the same face more than once. But then, as she bought a smoothie and sat down, she caught him again in her peripheral vision. He wasn't shopping, wasn't eating, wasn't even pretending to look at his phone. He was just watching. The first time their eyes met, he quickly turned away. But the second time, he didn't bother to hide it. His stare was sharp, cold, and it made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. When she got up and walked to another store, hoping she was just being paranoid, he moved too. His pace matched hers, his steps only a few beats behind. Her gut twisted, and a memory of her mother's voice filled her head. Always trust your instincts. If something feels off, get help immediately. That was all Nia needed. She wasn't the type to imagine things, and her mom had drilled into her that ignoring a bad feeling could be dangerous. So she went straight to the police officer on duty, standing tall near the main entrance. He looked like the type of man who had seen it all. Broad shoulders, mirrored sunglasses, and a casual lean against the wall. Surely, he'd take her seriously. But he didn't. The moment she explained what was happening, his reaction was a laugh. Loud, mocking, echoing through the tiled space of the mall. "Kid, you've been watching too many movies," he said, shaking his head. "This is a safe mall. Go shop for some shoes." The humiliation burned hotter than fire. Shoppers glanced over, smirks playing on their lips as if she were some silly teenager crying wolf. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, but she couldn't because behind the officer's broad frame, she saw him again. The man in the hoodie. He was closer now, lingering just a few feet away. He pretended to study a display in the window of a sports store, but his eyes flickered toward her with chilling intent. Her pulse skyrocketed. She could almost feel his presence crawling up her spine. The officer's dismissive laugh no longer mattered. The bystanders' judgmental stares no longer mattered. What mattered was that she was in danger, and no one here seemed willing to protect her. Her hands trembled as she pulled her phone from her pocket. She held it so tightly her knuckles turned white. The officer chuckled again, rolling his eyes. "What, you calm, Mommy? Is she going to come hold your hand?" He teased, clearly entertained by what he thought was a child overreacting. Nia ignored him. She wasn't about to waste her breath arguing with a man who had already decided not to believe her. She pressed the screen with shaky fingers and hit call mom. The line rang once, twice. Nia's throat was dry, her heart hammering so hard she thought the officer must hear it. Behind him, the man in the hoodie shifted, stepping away from the window. He was moving toward her now. Finally, the call clicked. Mom. Nia's voice was barely above a whisper, but it was loaded with urgency. It's happening. Someone's following me. I told the officer, but he doesn't believe me. There was a sharp silence on the other end. Her mother's breathing was steady, controlled, but Nia knew that tone. It was the voice of a woman already calculating, already moving. Where are you? Her mom asked. The mall. By the front entrance. He's here. He's coming closer. Stay where you are. Don't panic. Don't argue with the officer. Just stay visible. I'm on my way. Nia's shoulders shook, but she took a deep breath, gripping the phone like a lifeline. Her mother's words always carried weight. Calm, unshakable, strong enough to steady her even in the worst moments. For the first time since she noticed the hooded man, Nia's fear eased just slightly. Her mom was coming. She glanced past the officer again. The man was still there, inching closer with deliberate steps, his hood casting a shadow over most of his face. Her skin prickled with dread. The officer remained oblivious, still smirking, still assuming she was just a kid with a wild imagination. But Nia knew better, and soon the officer would too, because when her mother arrived, everything would change. Her mother wasn't just mom. She wasn't just the woman who packed lunches, reminded her to study, or drove her to school. She was something else entirely. A protector, a fighter, a woman who had spent years training to face situations most people couldn't even imagine. She was special forces, and right now, she was on her way fast. Nia clutched her phone and raised her chin, determination flickering in her eyes. The man in the hoodie thought she was alone. The officer thought she was exaggerating, but they were both about to learn the same truth. Her mother didn't need to be told twice. When she said she was coming, nothing and no one could stop her. It didn't take long. The mall's busy chatter, the rhythmic clatter of footsteps, and the faint music from store speakers all seemed to fade the moment the crowd shifted. Shoppers gasped, their conversations halting as heads turned toward the entrance. A ripple moved through the sea of people, parting like a wave as a woman strode in with commanding force. She was dressed in full camouflage combat gear, the kind civilians only saw in movies or news reports. A tactical vest hugged her frame, loaded with pouches and secured with straps. Her boots struck the tiled floor with a heavy, purposeful cadence, each step echoing with authority. The bold name patch on her vest read Delta Force, a title that carried weight far beyond the mall's polished glass and plastic storefronts. This wasn't just anyone's mom. This was Sergeant Maya Johnson, a decorated member of the U.S. Army's elite Special Forces unit. The sight of her was enough to silence laughter, still the whispers, and make even the nosiest shoppers step back in awe. For some it was shock. For others it was respect. But for one girl, it was pure, overwhelming relief. Nia broke into a sprint, her sneakers squeaking against the floor as she ran straight into her mother's open arms. Her body shook as the adrenaline and fear spilled over, and at last, tears streamed down her cheeks. Maya wrapped her arms around her daughter, strong and unyielding, yet gentle in a way only a mother could be. She pressed her chin briefly against Nia's head, steadying her, whispering so only Nia could hear. You did the right thing, baby. I've got you now. The officer, who only moments ago had laughed and mocked, stood frozen in place. His smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a pale, wide-eyed expression of disbelief. He stammered, his words tripping over his tongue like a child caught in a lie. I didn't realize. Maya's sharp eyes cut straight through him. Her glare was sharper than any weapon she carried, laced with the kind of authority that came from years of leadership in life-or-death situations. You didn't realize, she repeated, her voice cold and unwavering. You didn't realize my daughter was telling the truth? You didn't realize she was scared? You think her safety is a joke? The question wasn't a question, it was an indictment. Her words carried so much weight that even the bustling mall seemed to go silent. Store employees peeked over counters, shoppers froze mid-step, and even the mall's background music seemed to hush in respect. The officer opened his mouth again, but no words came out. Sweat beaded along his forehead, his earlier arrogance crumbling under Maya's presence. He looked less like a man of authority now and more like a child being disciplined. But Maya wasn't done. She shifted her stance, placing herself fully between Nia and the crowd, her protective instincts on full display. Her gaze swept the area, scanning with the trained precision of someone used to spotting threats in chaos. It didn't take her long to find him, the tall man in the black hoodie, frozen mid-step a short distance away, as if he'd been caught under a spotlight. Her voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "You, don't move." The hooded man stiffened. His eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape, but the crowd had already parted, leaving him exposed. The strength in Maya's tone rooted him to the spot. He had expected a vulnerable teenager, not a mother who looked like she'd stepped off a battlefield. Maya took a step forward, still holding Nia close with one arm. "You've been shadowing my daughter, following her, watching her. What exactly did you think was going to happen?" The man stammered something incoherent, his voice low and shaky. The officer, suddenly desperate to redeem himself, snapped out of his daze and hurried toward the man. "Why, sir, I'll handle this. You're coming with me." Maya's hand shot up, stopping him cold. Her voice was icy but controlled. "You'll finally handle this. But understand something. If you had listened to my daughter when she first came to you, this wouldn't have gone this far." The officer swallowed hard, his face flushed with shame. He nodded quickly, unable to argue. Maya finally turned her attention back to Nia. She brushed a tear from her daughter's cheek, her expression softening in a way that only she could manage after delivering such a scolding. "You were brave, Nia. You trusted your instincts. That's what saved you." The crowd, still watching in stunned silence, seemed to collectively exhale. Some looked away, embarrassed that they hadn't stepped in when Nia needed them. Others whispered in awe about the woman who had walked into the mall like a force of nature. But Nia didn't care about them. All that mattered was that her mother was here, that the fear pressing against her chest had finally lifted. Sergeant Maya Johnson stood tall, one arm around her daughter, her other hand resting on her tactical vest. In that moment, she wasn't just a soldier. She wasn't just a mother. She was both, and everyone in that mall knew it. And no one would ever laugh at her daughter again. Without hesitation, Maya turned toward the man in the hoodie. Years of training sharpened her senses, and in seconds she read him like an open book. The way his weight shifted nervously from one foot to the other, the twitch of his hand near his pocket, the way his eyes darted toward the exit. This wasn't some innocent shopper. This was a predator caught in the act. "Mall security, now," Maya commanded, her voice calm, yet carrying the kind of authority that left no room for argument. Two security guards who had been lingering nearby exchanged startled glances before rushing forward. Unlike the officer who had dismissed Nia, they recognized the seriousness in Maya's tone. They moved in quickly, circling the man in the hoodie. "Hey, what's going on?" the man snapped, his voice rising, his bravado crumbling into panic. He tried to push past them, but Maya's glare stopped him cold. The guard caught his arms, struggling as he thrashed violently. His resistance was more than enough proof that Nia's instincts had been dead on. Shoppers gasped as the struggle escalated. Some pulled out their phones to record, others shielded their children's eyes. But when the man's bag was ripped from his shoulder and spilled onto the shiny mall floor, the truth became undeniable. Out tumbled a pair of heavy gloves, thick zip ties, and, most chilling of all, a long, serrated knife. The air seemed to freeze. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave of dread. "Oh my God, he had a knife." She was telling the truth. The officer who had laughed earlier stood frozen, his face drained of color. His once cocky posture wilted, his shoulders sagging as shame washed over him. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but it no longer looked like a symbol of authority. It looked like a mirror reflecting his failure. Maya's gaze locked on him, fierce and unyielding. She didn't raise her voice, but every syllable carried weight. "Do you see now?" she said, steadily, her tone like steel. "Next time, when a young black girl tells you she's in danger, you don't laugh. You listen." The officer opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came. His jaw trembled, his pride shattered in front of dozens of witnesses. The crowd, which had gathered in a thick circle, erupted in applause. The sound echoed through the vast halls of the mall, rolling like thunder. Some shouted, "Thank you," to Maya. Others clapped with tears in their eyes, while a few shook their heads in disbelief that no one, not even the officer, had believed Nia until now. Maya didn't bask in the praise. She wasn't there to be a hero. She was there because her daughter had called, and nothing mattered more than that. She crouched down in front of Nia, who was still clinging to her, her small body trembling from the adrenaline and fear. "You were brave," Maya whispered, her hands gently brushing the tears from her daughter's cheeks. "You trusted yourself. That's what saved you." Nia sniffled, her voice small but certain. "I remember what you always said, to trust my instincts, even when no one else believes me." Pride swelled in Maya's chest, though her expression remained composed. "And you did exactly that. I couldn't be prouder of you." The bystanders, many of whom had doubted Nia or stood by silently, shifted uncomfortably. The reality stung. They had dismissed her too, choosing convenience over compassion. Now they watched as a mother, in full combat gear, validated what they should have done from the start. Believe her. The detained man, now handcuffed by mall security, kept his head down as police reinforcements arrived to take him away. The same officer who had mocked Nia earlier shuffled back, trying to make himself invisible, but Maya wasn't finished. She turned her head slightly, her eyes cutting into him one last time. "Do better," she said firmly. "Lives depend on it." Her words weren't just for him. They were for every person standing there, for every parent holding their child's hand a little tighter, for every teenager who had ever been dismissed because of their age, their race, or their voice. Slowly, the tension in the air began to ease. The danger was gone, replaced by an energy of gratitude and respect. The crowd began to disperse, but not before many offered nods, smiles, and whispered thanks to Maya and Nia. As the mall returned to its normal rhythm, Maya stood tall, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder. To the world, she was Sergeant Maya Johnson of the U.S. Army's Delta Force, a decorated soldier who had faced enemies on battlefields across the globe. But to Nia, she was simply Mom, the one person who always believed her, always protected her, and always showed up. And on this day, in the middle of an ordinary shopping mall, she had reminded everyone of a simple truth. Believing someone in their moment of fear could make the difference between safety and tragedy. Nia leaned into her mother's side, her breathing steadier now, her courage restored. The memory of the officer's laughter still stung, but the image of her mother standing tall, commanding the moment, burned brighter. She knew she'd carry that strength with her forever. The mall had witnessed more than just an arrest that day. It had witnessed the power of a daughter's instincts, a mother's unshakable love, and a lesson the world should never forget. Later, as the suspect was taken away in handcuffs, the mall's energy began to return, though the tension still lingered in the air. Shoppers whispered to one another, replaying what they had just witnessed: the knife, the zip ties, the mother who stormed in like a force of nature. Parents held their children closer, teens exchanged wide-eyed glances, and more than one person silently vowed never to brush off a warning sign again. The police officer, the same man whose laughter had once echoed through the mall, now looked like a shell of himself. His swagger was gone, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment, his eyes dropped to the floor before he found the courage to approach Maya and Nia. His voice shook as he spoke, words rough and awkward as they clawed their way out of his throat. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone quiet but heavy. "I shouldn't have dismissed her. I should have listened." It wasn't just an apology, it was a confession, a recognition of the arrogance that had blinded him, of the prejudice that had silenced a girl who had been brave enough to speak up. For a 15-year-old girl, that was no small victory. As the last of the commotion settled, word of what had happened began to ripple outward. People told their friends, who told their families, who told their co-workers. The story grew. The tale of a teenage girl who refused to stay silent, a police officer who learned a hard lesson about respect, and a mother, a decorated Special Forces soldier, who reminded everyone that protection didn't always come in the form of a badge. Sometimes it came in the form of a woman in camouflage gear, storming through a mall like justice itself. News outlets picked up the incident, retelling it with headlines that sparked debates and conversations. Parents sat their children down that evening and told them, if you ever feel unsafe, you speak up. Don't let anyone tell you your fear isn't real. Teachers reminded their students that bravery sometimes looks like asking for help, even if people don't believe you right away. And across the city, that officer's failure became a cautionary tale whispered among law enforcement. Never underestimate the voice of a child. But for Nia, the story wasn't about headlines or lessons for strangers. For her, it was about something deeper. It was about knowing that her voice mattered, that even when it was ignored, it still had power, that even when she was dismissed, she had the strength to keep speaking, and that when all else failed, she had a mother who would always come running. Sergeant Maya Johnson knew the world saw her as a warrior, a soldier, a member of the Delta Force. But to Nia, she was simply Mom, the woman who had armed her with more than protection. She had armed her with courage, with self-trust, with the knowledge that silence was never an option when danger was near. And that knowledge had saved her life. From that day forward, the story of the mall wasn't just another passing incident. It became a reminder etched in memory. The day a young girl's instincts proved true. The day a careless laugh nearly cost everything. And the day a mother showed that the fiercest battles aren't always fought overseas. Sometimes they're fought right here at home, in the moments when a child needs to be believed. And the next time anyone thought about dismissing a young girl's voice, they remembered this day. Because when her mom arrived in Delta Force gear, the world realized one thing. This family was not to be underestimated. And that's the story of how one young girl's courage and her mother's unstoppable strength changed everything inside that mall. What do you think about this? Should the officer have taken her seriously from the start? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.